Just 1 week ago, I dove back into the world of The Walking Dead for one reason and one reason only, and that was Rick Grimes. Now, in only this show's second episode, I'm already seeing signs of all the same reasons I gave up on The Walking Dead in the first place, rearing their ugly head once again. It's safe to say that after a decent start last week, I felt pretty underwhelmed this week. Let's discuss.
I watch so you don't have to.
Now, I don't want to sound like a broken record when I say this, but it is something that needs to be said. Rick Grimes finishing his story is the only reason that I'm watching The Ones Who Live.
It's true.
I love Michonne as a character, and I understand her importance and significance in Rick's story. It's his current wife. It's the mother of his child. Someone like Rick, who has already lost one wife and one child, needs people like Michonne and Judith in his life, so he has something to keep fighting for. The issue for me, and this has always been my issue with The Walking Dead, dating all the way back to around season 4, and that's this fractured story structure that this show continues to use. Why is it that we've seen many great shows follow multiple characters in the same episode, sometimes even across great distances, and yet for some reason The Walking Dead seems to be incapable of doing that? They want to focus on one character at a time.
Stop it!
If we are being honest with ourselves, you only really needed to watch the last 15 minutes or so of this second episode. And if you did, you would have missed nothing of importance as it pertains to Rick Grimes' story. To be clear, I understand to an extent why they felt the need to show us an entire episode of Michonne interacting with these people we don't know on her way to reuniting with Rick. But in the grand scheme of things, and what is advertised as only a 6-episode season, did we really have time to dedicate a whole episode to this? Did we really need to put the character of Michonne through further heartache to get the point across that she's losing hope, but that her fighting spirit will not allow her to fully give up? No, we didn't need that. We already knew this about her prior to this episode.
Don't waste my motherfucking time!
Now, don't get me wrong, I thought Denai was excellent from an acting perspective in this episode, especially in her more dramatic moments. But when it came right down to it, it was very difficult for me to be invested in these characters that she is spending so much time with. I mean, they do try to give them relevance, but ultimately all it really does is prolong what the audience is looking forward to, and that's the reuniting of Rick and Michonne. And this is after they've already shown us that they do in fact reunite. It kind of removes all the tension from any moment involving Michonne, considering we know for a fact that she ultimately survives. And this is the problem with this type of story structure. This is the problem that has plagued The Walking Dead for some time now.
Something very familiar about all this.
Now, I know what some of you might say, well, this episode was intended to set up the conflict that is going to be the focus of the rest of the show. That being, Michonne wants revenge on the CRM for killing her friends, and Rick, on the other hand, simply just wants to escape. And they very much set up that conflict between them in the final moments of this episode. And based on all accounts and the scenes they show us from next week's episode, either that episode or a majority of this show will focus heavily on Michonne and her desire to extract that revenge. I hate to say it, but it already feels like Rick is taking a back seat to Michonne. What it feels like we are going to have more of is yet another thing that used to piss me off about the later seasons of The Walking Dead. That being, there was a point in the show where characters stopped listening to Rick and stopped following his lead. Even though he earned the right to be their leader, and he always had the group's best interests at heart, even when he was at his most unstable mentally. Unfortunately, it feels like they may continue that trend here.
Why?
Sure, initially she goes along with Rick's plan to safely integrate into this community, basically just to buy him some time so he can figure a way out for both of them. But they are definitely planting seeds for her to take matters into her own hands, which could potentially ruin Rick's chances of reuniting with his daughter. I understand that the conflict for this show has to come from somewhere, but them going about it in this way feels like the show is repeating past mistakes. I'll wait and see how it plays out before I fully judge it, but that's pretty much how this episode made me feel watching it as it is now. So this episode comes to an end with Rick and Michonne now inside and both a part of this CRM community. They're trying to make it look as if they don't know each other because that would set up red flags everywhere. I'm not 100% sold on the reason why they didn't just make a run for it after the helicopter crash, but for the sake of adding drama to the show, I'll let that slide. They do throw one final monkey wrench into the plans when they reintroduce Jadis to the equation. Now, I had to look her up because the only thing I really remembered about her was her f***ed up haircut.
What the hell am I looking at? When does this happen in the movie?
But she was the leader of the junkyard people, the Scavengers, and they once betrayed Rick and company in favor of joining forces with Negan against them. And at some point in between then and now, I guess she became a CRM officer. And she confronts Rick in his quarters at the very end of this episode. Basically to say she knows about Michonne, and if they try to escape, that she is going to murder everyone in Alexandria, their home. So this will be yet another added wrinkle that will inevitably make things harder for Rick and Michonne and their escape. So there is a lot of drama to come in Rick's presumed final 4 episodes. My only hope is that they keep the focus mainly on Rick. They can have a subplot for Michonne that plays out gradually over the last 4 episodes. But the last thing I want is for Rick to feel like a side character in his own story again. Especially with the limited amount of time that we have left with him.
That makes sense.
Like I said last week, they have an opportunity to redeem this show in the eyes of disgruntled fans. But they're never going to be able to do that until they prove that they've learned from their past mistakes.
Y'all be cool. Right on.